All right, welcome back. It's the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Bruen, and we have a great guest today. He's one of the elite collectors when it comes to the world of collectibles and comics and toys and whatever it may be, photos. He is the godfather of promo photos. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mike Ford. Mike, thanks for joining us
Joe.
today.
Thank you, Joe. It's a delight to be with you.
Pleasure to have you. And, this is something we've been wanting to do for a long time. So I'm glad that we're finally able to do this and kind of pick your brain, and other fellow collectors will get a chance to know you a little bit more and what you've collected over the years. So really looking forward to a deep dive into the collection and the mind of Mike Ford. So, Mike, growing up as a kid, why don't you tell us a little about growing up and where you grew up, some of your hobbies, and maybe end that with when you first discovered pro wrestling.
Well, I began as a child, as Bill Cosby once said. My father was a career Air Force officer, so I was born in Texas, promptly shipped out to New Hampshire, from there to California. Then the first place I remember actually was California. I started kindergarten there. Went to Puerto Rico from 1961 to 65, to upstate New York from there, and then actually into your neck of the woods in Chicopee Falls, Massachusetts, where my dad was stationed at Westover. And it was largely when we moved back from in Puerto Rico is where I first started to notice collectible items. I was I would have been first through fourth grade in Puerto Rico. And it all started with a babysitter. My parents went to San Juan. They left us with a babysitter. I was probably about 7. And she left behind 4 Marvel comic books. Avengers #2, Hulk #6. I don't remember the other 2, but I became fascinated just reading them. Next thing I know, I'm bugging my mom to take me to the PX and get me some more comics, particularly ones of the Hulk, who was the most featured character in those 2 comics that I just mentioned. From there, it was just a short leap to collecting non-sports cards. And I wouldn't say I was a toy collector. I bought toys to play with, not to collect. But the collecting did start later. So largely, I've been comic collecting and toy collecting and card collecting for over 60 years. So much of what I have you see now, I purchased many, many years ago at a fraction of what they might go for today, because I don't think I could afford to repurchase all this stuff at today's prices.
Right.
It was in Massachusetts that I first discovered pro wrestling. It was on my local channel, Springfield, Massachusetts channel, and it was on every Saturday morning. And I remember I was into it right away. I accepted it as real. I was totally a mark. I had a little book, and I'd write down all the wrestlers' names and keep records of their wins and losses and all that. I mean, my favorite wrestler was Victor Rivera. He was from Puerto Rico. This was in the old WWWF out of New York and Connecticut, run by Vince McMahon Sr. And I loved it. I just thought it was amazing, and it totally captured my imagination. And my mom would come into the room. What do you have that crap on for? Don't you know it's fake? It is not fake, Mom. And then one day, Victor Rivera was wrestling Baron Miguel Cicluna, who was famous for reaching into his tights for a foreign object. And he swung at Victor, missed him by a foot, and Victor went down out. And my jaw dropped. I go, Mom was right. So that kind of ended pro wrestling for me, because I couldn't admit that Mom was right. So this is about 1969 or so. And by that time, I was getting into mainstream sports, hockey, football, basketball, baseball, collecting those types of items. And wrestling went well into the back burner, and I just basically paid very little attention to it for the next almost 15 years. Until about 1982, a friend of mine said, hey, this is when by then I'd been married and moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. And a friend of mine from college said, hey, Andre the Giant is wrestling at the Cow Palace. You want to go? And I didn't know. I'd never seen Andre. I'd heard of him because everybody had heard of Andre. And I go, well, this sounds like it's fun. I used to like wrestling. I'll go. So we went. We had a great time. Shortly thereafter, a different friend who owned a comic book shop told me there's going to be a special on MTV with Roddy Piper. I knew none of these people. But I turned it on, and it made me laugh and smile and forget my work day and all that. I just got back into it in a big way, and it didn't take very long for me to start collecting at that point because I already had that wired into my genetic makeup. Just collecting. If I find something I like, I look for items about that particular thing to collect. That's just who I am.
And you mentioned the Cow Palace. I mean, that's one of the legendary, arenas, venues for pro wrestling. Um, do you remember your experience at the Cow Palace? What was it like being there?
I went to the Cow Palace quite a bit because in those days, the WWF was transitioning to going national from the Northeast. And they would have a show at the Cow Palace every other month, and then across the bay in Oakland at the Oakland Indoor Coliseum the opposite month. So I'd be basically, and they would sell the tickets to the venue at the end of the show. So my youngest brother, who's since passed away, Jeff, and I would go virtually every month to whatever show was playing. This started about 1985 or so. And it continued right up until I'd say about 1990, 91 in there, where we would just go every month and I'd pick up the event programs and we'd just have a great time, just enjoying the matches. My brother and I also were heel fans. So, like when Nikolai Volkov would get up and ask everyone to join him in the singing of the Russian national anthem and show respect, we would do that. We'd put our hands over our hearts and fake we knew Russian. And the other fans would be booing, and we'd go, typical Americans, no class,
Right.
like Nikolai would do. We would just have fun. My brother would dress up as Sergeant Slaughter. He was into costuming. And he'd dress up as Sergeant Slaughter or the Macho Man or whoever was the main event heel in the match. And he'd get a lot of heat, but I was his backup.
There you go. Now, prior to the 80s, you said you first discovered pro wrestling. Victor Rivera, one of your favorites at that time. Um, who were some of your other favorites prior to the 80s?
Um, Prior to the 80s, well, again, I didn't really pay attention, I would say, for about 15 years. But in the late 60s, my favorites were, at that time, I was young enough to still be a fan of the baby faces and not the heels. I hated Miguel Cicluna. I thought he was awful from the island of Malta.
Yeah.
But of course, I loved Bruno. I was in Bruno's area, but I never got to see Bruno on TV. Bruno didn't wrestle on TV. And of course, this Italian connection of Antonio Pugliese and Dominic DeNucci, and those guys were favorites of mine because they were the good guys.
And once we slid into the 80s, who were some of your favorites of the 80s, 82 on?
Well, the person that first captured my imagination was not Andre or Hulk Hogan. It was Roddy Piper with his gift for gab. It's the typical type of thing when you look at someone and you go, I couldn't be Hulk Hogan. I couldn't be Andre the Giant, but I could be Roddy Piper. I could be a loudmouth heel and, jump somebody from behind and crack him with a chair. But I couldn't press him over my head and slam him,
Right.
type. So I identified with Piper. And then ultimately I did get to meet Piper many years later, and he was every bit as nice as you could have hoped. The opposite of his personality,
Right.
the cameras were on.
And as far as conventions, did you attend conventions early on? And if you did, what are some of the early conventions that you hit?
I attended many conventions, but most of them were comic book conventions.
Okay.
Starting in the 70s. I remember one year I worked all summer at the cannery in 100-degree heat in Atwater, California to earn $800, which I turned around and promptly spent on one weekend on
Wow.
comic books. And
Yeah.
my just shook their heads. You won't believe what I bought for 800 bucks in 1975, though. I have some of them to show later, but let's just say that 800 bucks would have cost me probably 800,000 now
Wow.
to repurchase what I bought in 1975.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And how about wrestling conventions? Did you ever attend any of those?
Wrestling conventions were few and far between here on the West Coast, I would say, until the 2000s. We had conventions usually in Fremont, California, with a promotion called Big Time Wrestling. They'd hold a show about every 6 months or so. They'd bring guests like I met Roddy Piper, Bret Hart, Jim Neidhart, Rocky Johnson, Rick Martel, Vader, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall. Quite a few people came out. And then there was one big convention that's actually kind of famous, the convention they held at the Cow Palace in 2007. And that convention featured a who's who, Harley Race, Slick, just trying to remember, Ted DiBiase, Virgil, Demolition. That's where I got to meet all those guys because those guys had not shown up on the West Coast, to my knowledge, before, at least up in the Bay Area. So that is the convention where the promoter ran out of money and the talent just stayed on and did their thing anyway. That's
I
also the
remember hearing
convention
about
where the Nasty Boys jumped Ken Shamrock, where
that.
Lex Luger had a health incident with a
Oh,
stroke. So this was a a very famous convention for all the wrong reasons, but
right.
nonetheless, as a fan, I enjoyed it because the lines were short because people didn't go, and no surprise, we've never had a big convention like that out here again.
Now, why do you think people didn't go with such a great lineup?
I don't really know. I mean, for me, it was a no-brainer. Stone Cold Steve Austin was there, but it was like $100 to get his autograph, so I didn't pay it. My brother paid it. He got in line, got him to sign two items when he was always supposed to get one,
Oh my
but he didn't
goodness.
give me one of his items.
Wow, Stone Cold at a
I couldn't
convention.
really,
Just
I couldn't really understand as to why no one showed. I mean, gosh, it seems like a no-brainer. If you're a wrestling fan, this is the show to go to. And there was
right.
actually there was a ring set up, and I brought my daughter, and my wife grudgingly came along, and we had a good time.
And as far as the promo photos go, why don't we get into that a little bit? You know, for me personally, early on, I would say, well, the first wrestler I ever met was Macho Man, and that was in 1991 at the Almax Food Festival, which was held inside of the Providence Civic Center in Rhode Island. And Macho Man was a guest there. And, if you paid admission to get into the food festival, you could meet Macho Man for free. So waited in line for Savage, and it was an awesome experience. And I got an 8.5 by 11 advertisement. It wasn't glossy or anything, but it was cardstock and had the Almax logo and the advertisement for the event. And it was basically a cropped, you know, promo photo put on there. And still have it to this day, signed by Savage. And that was kind of my first experience as of having, a piece autographed by a wrestler. Fast forward a little bit, 1995, I ended up getting an actual promo photo for the first time, which was my mom actually wrote to Titan Towers for my birthday. A letter about birthdays coming up, and I'm not too sure what she said, but they ended up sending me an official Bret Hart P Series promo photo, autographed by the Hitman, and that was my first time, holding an actual promo photo, and I was just addicted from that point forward. Um, what was your first experience with the promo photos? And if you can kind of go into the history of promos for fans that don't know, they started with like lobby cards and kind of give the history of the promo photo.
Well, for me, my first experience with promo photos was in 1987 when the WWF ice cream bars first came out. They debuted, and at the time, the first year they were released, they did not have trading cards inside the boxes. But they did on the back have a promotion where for a few bucks you could send away to the WWF and they would send you a promo photo with the proof of purchase from the box. Well, I bought 12 boxes and sent away for all 12 ice cream promo photos to collect the set because that was, again, the way I'm wired. And when they came, I was just stunned at how beautiful, how vibrant the colors were. The selection was great. It was all my favorites in there. The Hart Foundation, the Macho Man, Hulk Hogan. They were all there. And that was my first exposure to collecting photos. Up until that time, I didn't have any. And then shortly thereafter, I'd been a subscriber to the WWF magazine since about 1986 or 7. And they started to have, in the merchandise section of the magazine, an offer to send away for promo photos, usually sets of 4. And these would come out about twice a year. So I just started doing that along with my regular orders because I'd order other merchandise from the merchandise section of the magazines. And over time, I built up a pretty good collection, but I still had no knowledge at that time, pre-eBay, and no wrestling shows out here on the West Coast, that there were other promo photos that I did not have or had not seen. Then eBay happened. I think for my birthday present one year, my wife got me a computer and taught me how to get on the online, and eBay opened up a can of worms that never really closed. And I discovered right away promo photos and started putting together a collection and learning through trial and error what was legitimate, what was a copy, how to identify them. And just there's no checklist, of course, nor are there any books written on the subject. So I educated myself as best I could. At those days on eBay, you could actually communicate with other people through the messenger. Now, for privacy reasons and because people make so many sales of items offline if they can to avoid eBay fees, eBay has closed that feature. But during that time, I was able to make a number of friends in the wrestling community that I still have contact with today, a lot of them. And together we networked and we figured out, and we would alert each other when we'd see things on eBay. Hey, here you have. They knew that I liked particular. At the time, I was not collecting everything. I was just collecting my favorites, like maybe 15, 20 different wrestlers. But when I pretty much had gotten all those, I wasn't done yet. I still was interested in the hobby, so I continued to add to my collection. My collection's never been a goal to complete for me. It's impossible to complete it. No one can have everything in wrestling because no one even knows everything that's out there. I thought, everything in 25 plus years of doing this, and something seems to turn up every week that I'd never seen before online. So that has never been a practical consideration of mine. I just collect for fun.
And who were some of the, if you remember, some of the early um, collectors on eBay that you would purchase from? I remember for me, it was JBK's Wrestling. There was Dave Korn, a few others at that time that were regulars that kind of sold, unsigned promo photos.
Oh, Maniac Joe Colosi. Trying to remember. It's been too long and I'm too old, but I made a number of friends like Dave Sabick and Ryan Reese and Chris Furnitz and yourself and on eBay that I'm still largely in touch with. Um, and it's been a wonderful experience. I'm probably closer to the wrestling community than I am any of my other collecting hobbies just because the wrestling community is so tight knit as opposed to comic. I have no comic friends, no trading card friends that I communicate with online.
And how about the history of the lobby cards and how they transitioned into full size photos? If you want to talk about that a little bit.
I actually don't know anything. By lobby cards, I'm thinking movies. What are actually you referring to?
Oh well, the promo photos when they were very small, four by
Oh, okay.
six or yeah.
Well, they were sold largely at gimmick tables. The wrestlers would have them printed up themselves. They'd send a girlfriend or maybe themselves that would go out before the matches, and they would sell these large or small photos at the gimmick tables at wrestling events for a couple bucks each, and that's the way they augmented their wrestling income. Um, as far as when they started going to more 8 by 10, I think a lot of that came out of the wrestling magazines where, or they were either one of two ways. They were out of the wrestling magazines where you could send away for photos similar to the way the WWF used that model in the late 80s to send away for promo photos, or they were press photos, which were sent out to the magazines and to newspapers to promote upcoming events. That's largely the history, as far as I know, of wrestling promo photos.
And for those fans that don't know, a lot of those photos you'll see on the bottom border, it'll say for press use only. And that's why they were intended for specifically, newspapers, magazines, stuff like that for advertising purposes. So they were never, other than the fan club and the magazine orders, they were never intended for the fans. So it's miraculous that we've gotten our hands on so many over the years that weren't even intended for us.
Right. Later, I would say, starting in the late '80s, is the first time you started to see WWF photos appear without the for press use on them. And those photos were, again, they were primarily intended to be used by the wrestlers for signings, but they were in a much more classy format and often full color. And so those are the ones that you might have seen uh, first appear, and then they quickly morphed into what is known as the P series. P series beginning in 1990 and going through about 2007 or early 2008.
And what's your thoughts on the gaps in the P series? So, at one point there's a section where there's almost, 100 numbers missing in the P series. And I've asked Tom Buchanan about this, and he's not even sure. There's not really any rhyme or reason. He wasn't too positive about it. But what's your take on that? Why do you think that happened?
I think a lot of the numbers were actually produced, but trashed is what I've heard. I was given a list one time, but that I no longer have. I've never seen it corroborated by any visual evidence of their existence, but apparently they were either planned or produced, but they were quickly discarded for whatever reason. I'm not really sure. I know that many of the P numbers have never surfaced over the years in my many years of looking at for them. Even some early ones that you would think that why would there be no P010 or P011? Why does it jump from? And for years, I just wondered, well, maybe these were never produced, and maybe they weren't. We may never know. I used to think that about other numbers, and then boom, I think Tom Buchanan sold me a few of numbers that I'd never seen before. I just go, wow, well, this guy's Ico Pro. He's not even a wrestler. He's got a P number.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Tom said that, in the Titan Towers, basically they were kept in a small room that was probably the size of a bathroom. And there would be shelves, kind of like in my room here, just along the walls, all four sides, and there would be stacks of each individual's promo photo all along the shelves on each shelf. And then there'd be cases on the bottom level of all the promos, and that's how they stored them. And then they also had pull-out drawers where they would be in folders upright, and you can kind of take what you need. And he said that's how it was. And, if you needed a certain superstar, you walk in there and you just take whatever you need. And imagine seeing that in person. That just seems like, wow, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, wrestling fans' wet dream, I think.
Right. Now, when it comes to WrestleManias, the biggest event that there is for pro wrestling, the Super Bowl of wrestling. What's your favorite WrestleMania, either memory or WrestleMania itself?
Let me think here. I'd say my favorite WrestleMania match was actually the Macho Man against the Ultimate Warrior retirement match. I thought it was brilliantly staged over 2 years with Sherry coming in, representing and replacing Elizabeth, and Elizabeth reemerging at the end of the match. People were crying in the stands, and I was so wrapped up by the emotion of the storytelling that even I was getting a little misty because I'm a big Savage fan, and just to see, Elizabeth and Savage back together again after 2 years of discontent was fun. And the actual match itself was great. It was epic. It was right up there with Hogan Andre. Now, most people will tell you Savage's match with Steamboat, and that's right there for me too. But the Warrior Savage match, even though Savage lost, and of course he lost against Steamboat too, that's part of wrestling. Somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose.
Right.
And that's part of the storytelling. So
How
those two,
important do you,
as far as a total card, it's got to be the WrestleMania 3 at the Silver Dome.
and how important do you think WrestleMania 1 was? Obviously, they put everything on the line from a company standpoint, but if they didn't have WrestleMania, do you think that it would have still gone on to be what it's become today?
Well, running concurrent with WrestleMania at the time was Starrcade, so it was kind of an industry-wide effort to go to pay-per-view to augment their financial situation. And if the WWF hadn't done it, the NWA would have, and they might have been more successful. But definitely, Mr. McMahon was much more astute when it came to getting eyes on his product through cross promotion with MTV and with Hollywood with Mr. T. And really, it was a master class in how to promote your product. And he did it in every fashion. He appealed to everybody. He appealed to women and young people with Cyndi Lauper. He appealed to kids with Mr. T. He appealed again to teenagers like some of my friends that love to collect things with the action figures and he appealed to older fans with his magazine and some of his collectible items.
Who do you think transitioned the best as far as, celebrity into the wrestling business, whether it be for one appearance or long term? Who do you think had the best transition there?
That's a good question. I'm hesitant to say Mr. T, but I'll go with him because he actually appeared in two WrestleManias in a wrestling fashion. But I'm not really sure about that one. Neither of Mr. T's matches were exactly classics, but he had the right type of personality at the time to draw in a lot of eyes onto the product.
Yeah, he definitely had the presence, and A Team was, such a big hit at that time. And we even saw Hulk Hogan, go on the A Team, and they kind of crossed over there that way too. So, um, speaking of crossover, Zeus came out of the movie No Holds Barred and came after the Hulkster in real life, or in pro wrestling. What was your take on that when that was happening?
Um, to be honest with you, I never thought Zeus was all that impressive, either in the ring or certainly not on the microphone. He was impressive to look at, even
Yeah,
though he wore Chris Jericho's boots, I think, to appear taller than he actually was. I was not into Zeus that much at all. And I actually thought No Holds Barred was kind of boring. The only really good thing to come out of No Holds Barred was the match afterward with Hogan and Beefcake against Savage and Zeus in the cage. I did enjoy that.
yeah, that was a good attraction. Now, of course, there's a lost art of managers in wrestling. I mean, they're still around, but not as vibrant as they once were. Back in the day, you had Jimmy Hart and Classy Freddie Blassie, Lou Albano, the Grand Wizard, all the personalities, Mr. Fuji. What's your take on the lost art of managers and how they've kind of gone by the wayside over the years?
I think it's similar to what's happened with tag teams. Vince McMahon would take a look at the bottom line and he would see that he's putting these people on the road, the managers, and he's having to pay for their hotels, or not pay for their, but he's having to pay their salaries to go on the road. They're full time employees, and at some point he just decided that most of the wrestlers could speak for themselves, and it was unnecessary, which I disagree with because the managers added a heck of a lot to the promotion. It's similar to tag team, as you know. Vince would take a look at two guys and he goes, I'm paying two guys to wrestle one match against two other guys. So I'm paying four salaries for one match. And he just decided that there weren't going to be as many dedicated tag teams, nor would there be as many tag team matches unless it was just like a special team up between guys who were ordinarily single wrestlers.
And let's talk about the figures a little bit. I mean, LJN was really the first style figure that just really took off and was, a big deal. Obviously, there were figures previous to that, but LJN was such a big line. what was your first experience, kind of discovering those and seeing the different superstars that we saw in that line?
Well, they'd advertised them in the magazines and on TV, and so I went down to my local Toys R Us, and lo and behold, there were the LJN figures, and I immediately scooped them all up, and I go, where am I going to put these things? They're big, they're bulky. I had a collecting mentality, so I left them in the packaging, and I just started tacking them up to my wall. And as new ones came up, I just keep tacking them right across the wall until eventually I had wallpaper in my hobby room of LJN figures, and that continued when LJN pulled the plug in 1989 with the Hasbro figures in 1990 until about 1994 or so when they ceased.
Did you have an appreciation for the Hasbro's, just as big as you did for LJN, or did you prefer one over the other?
Oh, I love the LJNs because they were first. I had a friend that was quite prescient. He was a toy dealer, and he still owns a toy shop in San Jose, as far as I know. He puts on conventions, and he had said in the 80s when the LGN figures first came out, these are going to be worth a fortune someday. And I just kind of scoffed at it. I go, these things are just big garbled plastic. He was right. Some of those figures are, worth thousands now in their original packaging.
And the promo photos, some were black and white, some were color, some were 8 by 10, some were 8.5 by 11, and they even had the 11 by 14s for crowd shots and that sort of thing. What were some of your favorite promo photos over the years? You may have some examples there, throughout the history of wrestling.
Well, I have a number of the earliest promo photos that I actually collect are they're not even necessarily considered promo photos, but they're the Boyd Pierce cards, which were, I believe, either sold at gimmick tables or through the backs of magazines. They're about postcard sized, and they're not high gloss; they're semi gloss, and they contain photos of wrestlers from the '60s all the way up through the very early '80s. So I believe these things were in existence for well over 20 years. They feature people all the way from Lou Thez on up to Kerry Von Erich, just to show you the uh, the span of their production. And they were produced by a very famous, dapperly dressed ring announcer, Boyd Pierce, who worked with the Mid South territory. Those would
When
have
it
been
comes
the first ones that the oldest ones that I've collected. And then I started moving on up. I immediately started collecting WWF because that's what I was exposed to first. But later on, I wanted to get into some of these characters that existed prior to the WWF, or the same character, but in his various regional promotions before joining the WWF. So I would go back and collect what I call territory promos from the various regional promotions around the United States.
And how many territory promos would you say you've discovered over the years? Are they in the dozens or a couple
Well, if
hundred?
you count the Boyd Pierce, I'd say I probably have way over 1,000. But that isn't to say that that's how many there are, because there are many more than that. I largely just collect promos in regional territories from guys that usually had a presence later on in either the WWF or WCW.
And do you have a preference as far as the Boyd Pierce? You have WCW, WWF, black and whites, color. What's your favorite style to collect?
My favorite promos to collect, absolutely at the very top, are the WWF 8.5 or 8.25 by 11 promos that are almost inevitably color. And those photos exist without the press notation at the bottom. Those photos to me are the most vibrant, the most colorful, the most attractive. And they're from a period of time in which I was very, very much into pro wrestling. I was into it so much that I was subscribed to Pro Wrestling Torch and the Wrestling Observer newsletters. And this is pre internet, so I would have access to the information of what was going on behind the scenes, what the actual results of Saturday Night Main Event were before the event was even televised, those types of things. So I was very heavily into it, and I had a small circle of friends, including my younger brother, that we were just got into it together, and it was just kind of a fun thing to do.
And did your family over the years, did they appreciate your love for collecting, or were they kind of like, this is a lot, or do they support it?
I'm not sure about that. Collecting was always personal for me. I mean, I have a very large collection, but I don't share it a lot. It's just something I do because I like it. I never bought anything with the idea this is going to be worth a lot of money down the road. I better pick this up. I bought it
Sure.
just because I liked it, and if I no longer liked it, I sold it.
Right.
And as far as my
And then
family
you,
encouraging, I wouldn't say so. They probably thought I was a little bit goofy, spending every dime I ever made on trading cards or comic books. And then when I bought my first house, I sold my baseball card collection and my basketball card collection for $60,000, and that was basically a third of the price of the house. So people stopped
wow.
laughing at that point. Now, if I still had those same cards, who knows what they would be worth? I'd say at least 10 times that.
Right, exactly. I see some of the figures behind you there on the wall. You've got Hasbro's and all different eras. Do you have the complete Hasbro collection?
I'm not going to say the complete collection of the ones that were actually sold in stores. I don't have some of the two sendaways with Hogan and Bret Hart. For me, that's not necessary. I'd rather just have it's largely the same figures anyway on the packaging, just repainted. But
And how about oh, go ahead, sorry.
I wouldn't say I have all of everything. I have one of like I have all the WWF figures that were sold in stores, but I have the Hart Foundation singly rather than in the tag team box, and I have the Bulldogs in the tag team box rather than singling. So I have all the figures, but not necessarily all the packaging.
Now, if you had to, out of all the great stuff you have, out of all of that, what would your number one favorite piece of merchandise be? Whether you have it or you haven't had it yet, but you've seen it.
Well, in terms of wrestling, or in terms of because I collect a number of things.
Right. I guess wrestling.
I'll save that for a little bit later when I'm running down my top 12
Sure.
in various categories. But the question will be answered just in a little bit.
Absolutely. And then we have the watermark. Sometimes you see the Kodak watermark on the back of some of the WWF promos, specifically New Generation black and whites. You'll often see the watermark. Um, fans get deterred sometimes when they see the watermark because, in general, you don't normally have a watermark. It's kind of a sign of, oh, this is a copy. But um, there have been many instances where there'll be a watermark on a WCW promo, like a Ric Flair or a Hulk Hogan, and it is still authentic. What is your take on the whole process of promo photos as far as trying to differentiate the good from the bad, the fakes from the real ones?
Well, one thing that a lot of people do, and I'm opening myself up here a little bit, is the best way to find out if it's a original, legitimate promo photo is to check with somebody that has it that you're confident knows what the real one looks like. So I get Facebook messages all the time from people saying, "Hey, what does yours look like?" And I'll tell them, "Well, there is a watermark. There isn't a watermark. There's this, little detail. Is it exactly this size?" Those types of things. Is it glossy, semi-glossy? Those types of questions. As far as watermarks go, rule of thumb: if it's color and it's WWF and it has a watermark, it's probably a fake. If it's black and white and it has a Kodak watermark, it's probably legit. If it doesn't have a watermark, then it's maybe a bit more likely not to be legit if it's black and white. WCW is a whole different can of worms. They use all kinds of different paper. They use it. One size doesn't quite fit all for WCW. So again, it's important to converse with people that in the hobby know what they're talking about, and there are a few.
Yeah. And I guess from a standpoint of shock value in wrestling, one of the biggest things I think, whether it be for the good or for the bad, was WWF purchasing WCW 2001. Back in that era, you may not have been as big of a fan in that time frame, but just experiencing that and seeing those announcements, what was that like? And do you think that was good for business or not?
Actually, I was a pretty big fan during the Attitude Era. My favorite era is the 80s. And really, I lost a lot of interest, like many did, when The Rock and Austin left at the end of the Attitude Era. I still maintained an interest in wrestling. As far as the WCW, quote, surprise, unquote, again, I was still a subscriber to Pro Wrestling Torch and Pro Wrestling Observer, and I had an inkling that something like that would happen. I didn't know it would go down quite the way it went down. And I had great hopes that this could be the greatest thing ever, but ultimately the WWF uh, castrated WCW. They didn't bring in the top guys. And the dream matchups that we'd always hoped we'd see, we never really got to see. So it was a missed opportunity that I think a lot of wrestling fans today feel that lived during that era feel let down a bit by. It was a chance to see the
Hartford.
Hulk versus Superman, or Thor versus Green Lantern, or Iron Man versus Batman. It was a chance to see matchups you never saw, and you really didn't get that chance. Certainly while they were in their quote prime unquote, you might have got to see it later on, but
Sure.
not when the iron was still hot.
Um, you know, Rewinding to 1990, the Survivor Series, Hartford, Connecticut, you had the egg, and it was being built up for weeks and weeks. Who was in the egg? What is in the egg? And it ended up being the gobbledygooker. Now, at that time, if you can kind of go back in your mind, what did you think it was going to be? What did you want it to be? Or were you just like, what the heck is this? Either way.
I was hoping it would be a major WCW star coming over to the WWF, but we did get a star in Hector Guerrero, but not quite packaged the way we had hoped.
What was your reaction when he hopped out of there?
I go, can we just move on with this segment as quickly as? I remember me and Gene getting out of that just as quickly as possible. This thing went
Yeah.
over like a fart in church.
Now, when it comes to the biggest stars in pro wrestling, um, Mount Rushmore, there's different ways that you could look at it, whether it be your personal favorites or the ones who sold the most merch or drew the most money or just on a mainstream level were perceived as the biggest stars. But however way you want to put it together, what is your Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling, all eras included?
That's a tough one to just limit to four. But if I had to, I would put Austin, I'd put Hogan, I would put Bruno, and I'd put Savage. And Savage is a selfish pick just because he's my favorite. But I don't think you can tell the story of pro wrestling without those four guys. And
Yeah.
you could say that for others like Andre and Harley Race and Ric Flair. But for me, when you just talk about the eyes on the product, guys that were successful in multiple, uh, well, not Bruno, but guys that were successful in multiple organizations, those would be my four. And Austin, even though he had a relatively short career due to injury, he brought more eyes onto the product, I think, than anybody before or since. So that's why he's there for me. And Bruno is just, yeah, he's the guy from when I was growing up. He was the man.
And you said you didn't get a chance to meet Bruno, or you did?
I did not. I never met Bruno, never met Savage, never met Hogan, never met Austin. I've met very few of these guys. I have many autographs, but a lot of them were purchased on eBay or obtained by friends.
Now, John Cena is on the retirement tour. He's just got a couple matches left. He's arguably been one of the biggest, if not the biggest star for the past, 15, 20 years now. Um, do you think there'll be another John Cena or another Hulk Hogan, somebody on that level once John hangs it up? Is
They
there
better
anybody
hope
left
there'll
that?
be, because
Yeah.
that's the way wrestling works. Is you have a guy on top that gets all the eyes on the product, and then the underneath wrestlers sell the rest of the product. And if you don't have a John Cena, then your product is not going to thrive. Now, for me, John Cena never did a thing for me. I thought he was as stale as week old bread, and I didn't enjoy his ring style at all. I thought it was clunky and awkward. I enjoyed watching Kurt Angle much more than John Cena, but Kurt Angle didn't have that special something. It was never really pushed to the moon like Cena was either. I'm not a
I
huge fan of the current product. I'd say the only guys I really go out of my way to watch are guys that have been around a while, like CM Punk and Brock Lesnar. I'm not really all that emotionally attached to the more recent stars that the WWE is promoting.
Sure. Now, the King of the Ring, 1998, with the World Wrestling Federation, you saw the infamous match, Mankind, The Undertaker, Hell in the Cell. Mankind gets tossed off the cell. What was your reaction at that time for something like
I
that,
saw it
which we
live.
hadn't really seen?
I saw it live on pay per view, and I just go, "What the heck is going on?" I could not believe it. I go, "You guys are crossing a line here," and of course, it was all Foley. I don't think Vince signed off on it at all. But
Right.
Foley, I just go, he's just a different cat. You didn't, and from that point, I think it definitely truncated his career. His injuries were severe, and he's paying for it today. But he was the type of showman that wanted to give his entire body to the sport that he loved, and he cherished wrestling in a way that I don't know anyone else has, and what he decided to give up, taking power bombs on the floor from a 450-pound man, diving off the top of a ring through a table, doing a back. Oh, just it's insane. Everybody that is a pro wrestling fan that loves the sport loves Mick Foley for what he gave, even if they shake their head and say you gave too much. You gave too much.
Now, we'll go over some of your favorites in just a little bit, but as far as comic books go, if you had to guess, how many comic books do you think are in your collection?
I've gotten rid of quite a few. I moved about 13 years ago from San Jose to my new location, and I downsized about half then because I just didn't want to. I basically gave them away or sold them for pennies on the dollar. I kept the more valuable books, or what we call the Silver Age books, and those are books that were produced largely in the 1960s from Marvel and a few from DC. But if I had to guess, I'd say maybe between 5 and 10,000 comics. Not
Did
really
you
sure.
ever get to meet Stan Lee or anybody like that?
I did. Here's
Oh, wow. Let's take a look at this.
my picture of my daughter and I with Stan in 2013. And Stan did something very special for me at that show. And I'll share that later on when I'm showing my comics. But
Yeah, absolutely.
my probably the most valuable thing I own, Stan Lee signed. And I mean, other than my home, possibly. I say possibly because it may not be. It may be more valuable than my home.
Now, where was that located where you
I
met
was in
Stan?
San Jose when I still lived there.
Okay. Now, you said you went to the Cow Palace several times for wrestling. Any other venues that you attended for pro wrestling over the years?
Um, I would mostly always in California. My brother Jeff would fly to various WrestleManias. I'd rather just watch him on pay per view. But flew to Seattle, and he would go down and get all the collectibles. He was much more of a he was younger, and he had extra money to do things like that. I'd rather just take the money that I would have spent and buy collectibles with it. But
Sure.
what was the original question as far as venues? Cow Palace, Oakland Coliseum. My wife and I did a summer vacation in the late '80s where we went down and we went to the old L.A. Sports Arena, and we saw the WWF one night. And then, as it happened, I was going down to San Diego the next day for the San Diego Comic Con, and so our hotel was right around the corner from the San Diego Sports Arena. And look, the WWE or WWF, as it was then called, is. I told her, "You want to go?" She goes, "No," but she went because she was a good sport. Whenever Ravishing Rick would ask for ladies to come down and get the Rude Awakening, I always stand up and point at her, right here. She wants to go, but he would have been mortified. But
That's funny.
so we went to San Diego. We saw the show. It was the exact same show with the exact same false finishes, the exact same pinning combination. It was the exact show. It really exposed the business if you went to both.
Wow. Yeah, I guess most people don't probably, so they get away with it.
Yeah, and this is in the '80s, back before, well, things were still a bit more kayfabe.
Right.
So it was definitely, if you went to both shows, the experience was exactly the same.
Wow, that's kind of crazy. Now, turning gears a little bit to trading cards, another part of your collection, big thing that you've been into over the years, not just pro wrestling and sports, but sumo as well. So, why don't you tell us about how you discovered sumo cards and who makes them, what company makes them, and are there a lot out there, or how does that look?
Um, Sumo cards actually go back a long way. I only really collect the modern ones. I got into sumo because I had a satellite dish in the '80s and early '90s, and even into the late '90s. I had a friend at work that was from Hawaii. I was a postal carrier, and he didn't have a satellite dish, and he'd asked me to record sumo for him on my VCR so he could watch it. So I go, I don't want to do that. But it was on at night and I wasn't watching anything anyway. So I recorded it for him. And guess what? I got hooked on it. So in addition to recording this stuff for my friend at work, I got into sumo. Of course, sumo is such a niche sport in the United States. There's virtually no fans of it to communicate with, although I do have a few now through Facebook. Um, I got into collecting sumo cards because that's, again, just my bent on things. I like to collect things I watch and things that interest me. And I found a company known as BBM, which actually stands for Baseball Magazine. And they're the tops of Japan, and they produce trading cards and have of sumo and wrestling, pro wrestling, and of baseball, Japanese baseball. And they've done this. And the other sports, I'm not sure from when because I don't collect those, but they began in sumo in 1997. So I made it my goal to collect all of the BBM sumo cards from the point at which they began in 1997, which coincidentally is right about the time that I got interested in following the sport. So I was familiar with many of the top guys for sure. And it took me quite a while to do it, but I had some help from Facebook friends in Japan. They would pick up items and I would bid in auctions. And eventually I completed it. So I now have pretty much a complete run of BBM sumo cards from their inauguration in 1987 to date. They come out with generally 2 sets a year, and they feature all the wrestlers from the top division, and one of the sets features the up and coming guys from the second division. There's 7 divisions in total, kind of like we have AAA and AA and single A and major leagues.
And as far as the wrestling end of it goes with trading cards, what are some of the different sets that you have, that have come out over the years? And what would you say is the most valuable set of wrestling trading cards?
Well, the wrestling cards, I go back into the '50s with the two Parkhurst sets, as well as the exhibit supply company of Chicago exhibit card sets. And I basically collected all the way up until about 2015 or so, and I pretty much stopped after that. I just decided my interest in the current product was so minimal that I just didn't enjoy collecting it anymore. But my main goal was actually to collect, you know, not just the nationally released sets, but the regional sets. In 1982, I went into a comic book store in Santa Clara, California, called Brian's Books, and he had in his display case these sealed decks of wrestling all-star cards. The first series had Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant was the cover card. And it's $5, so I said, okay, $5. I saw Andre wrestle at the Cow Palace. I'll get that. So I got the deck, and then a couple months later, he goes, hey, I got Series 2. And then about a year later, I got Series 3. So I picked up all three for $5 each. Now,
Oh my God.
I don't sealed now. They've got to be in the thousands. I'm not active, so I don't know. Obviously, if things are graded now, has a that has a an effect on the price, and mine aren't graded. I refuse to grade things. I'm old school. I instruct my daughter when my time comes to get many of these things graded because you'll maximize the dollars and you will have sales a lot easier if there's no argument about the grade. But I've generally collected in top grade on everything, and if I wasn't satisfied with the grade, I would hunt out a better copy and sell the lesser copy.
And how about magazines, programs for pro wrestling? Have you collected those over the years as well?
I collected the WWF magazine from from when it was known as the Victory magazine for 2 issues, with Snuka on the cover of the first issue in 1983, I believe. And I collected right up until about, again, when I started to lose interest in the product. And they ceased publication around 2007 or 8 anyway. But I collected all those and all the SmackDown magazines. I also collected the WCW magazines, and I still have a number of them. But again, during my downsize, I got rid of a lot of the issues from the period in WCW, which I was not all that interested, which is generally the NWO era. I know that was the hot era for WCW, but for me, WCW was always late 80s, early 90s. Those were the guys that I was most interested in watching perform.
And how do you want to be remembered? What do you want your legacy to be amongst fellow collectors and people that have known you over the years?
At this point, I'd just like to be known as a resource for people to ask questions or to communicate with. I've been in many of my hobbies a long, long time, so I've seen trends, I've seen things, I've held things in my hands that a lot of people maybe will never get the chance to own or to hold, and I have appreciation for them. I mean, if I'd gone a different way than I did, I could have, instead of picking up Spider-Man #1, I could have picked up Action Comics #1, the first appearance of Superman. It was available at the time. It was about 10 times what Spider-Man was, but I could have afforded it. Now I have some regret that I didn't. But again, I didn't collect because I thought it would be worth something. I collected because I liked it, and I was much more attuned to the Marvel comics than I was the DC.
Well, Mike Ford, thank you so much for joining us here on the All Access Entertainment Podcast.
You're welcome. If you can indulge me, Joe, I'd like to run down some of my top 12s of various collections. I think some of the watchers, viewers of this podcast may enjoy seeing some of them. And
Absolutely.
I've referenced a few of them already, so let's get to it. I'm going to start out with trading cards, because actually trading cards are what I collected first. I first started collecting trading cards in, I believe, 1962 with a set called the Civil War News set, which I no longer have. But I bought the cards because they were very colorful and very bloody, people stabbing each other with swords and whatnot. It was, a depiction of the South against the North in the Civil War, and it was illustrated by Norm Saunders. Norm Saunders was a prolific artist that drew the much more famous Mars Attacks cards that were released a year or two later. Those cards, I used to own a Mars Attack set. I still do, but it's a reprint set. I traded my Mars Attack set that I had by Norm Saunders for a Hogan's Heroes set to show you how smart I am. Although the Hogan's Heroes set is still worth $1,000 at least.
Oh, wow.
The Mars Attack set's probably worth 10 times that in the condition I had it. But I'm going to take you through the cards now.
Absolutely.
Let's see here. We referenced earlier the Wrestling All-Stars sets. These are the 2 cards I bought at Brian's Books in 1982, along with the rest of the sets.
Wow, those are fantastic.
And then I picked up all this is just a dupe I have laying around. I'm just using it for display, but picked up pretty much everything from the 80s as far as including the New Zealand sets. You'll recall I mentioned that the Boyd Pierce cards, here's an example of Boyd Pierce's Roddy Piper card. Look how young he is there. I believe at some point he may have had a nose job because his nose is noticeably different than it was when he showed up in the NWA in the early 80s.
Huh. And what would you call the size on the Boyd Pierce cards?
They're postcard size, so I say 3.5 by 5.
Yeah.
And we also referenced, this is one of the things I still collect. This is my all-time favorite sumo wrestler. And he's from Mongolia, not Japan. And this is Asashoryu. His nephew, Hoshoyu, is a current Yokozuna in Japan, and he's my favorite current sumo wrestler.
Wow.
I got into sports collecting after non-sport, but I'll show you just an example of a non-sport. First set I remember completing was this one from
Okay.
1966. And this is not the card I bought in 1966. My dad went down to the and bought a whole box, and my brother and I completed our Batman cards. But I bought this complete set in mint condition, and they're still mint from
Wow, that's really nice.
Larry Frisch cards, and they used to advertise on the back of the sporting news. I bought those in the mid 70s. And then I got into
I'm not
sport.
sure that I've ever seen those before.
Oh, really? Yeah. There's actually 5 different series of this. This is from the first series, the first card. Mint condition and slabbed. This would be several $1,000s now. I got into sports card collecting. I no longer really do that, but here, I'll give you an example. I collected baseball and basketball, but I sold those sets to buy my first house. But I kept my hockey and my football because those are my 2 favorite sports. And here's one of my hockey cards. This is Bobby Orr's rookie card from 1966. I made it a
Wow.
goal early on in my marriage that I was going to, if it didn't lead to a divorce, I was going to collect everything post World War II from hockey, football, baseball, and basketball. Never completed baseball, it's just too difficult, but I did with basketball, hockey, and football. And here's a football card I just recently purchased on eBay of Jim Brown, which was the
Oh,
last
wow.
Jim Brown card I needed to complete my collection of Jim Brown. As far as what I still collect, and I don't, the only things I collect currently are some comic books, very few. I also collect sumo cards and postcards. Here's an example of some of the postcards. I like to collect largely older TV and movie stars rather than current. Here's a Marilyn Monroe greeting card from the UK from the 50s. And
Wow.
this one is the only one I've ever seen of Adam West as Batman. It's a TV fan card. If you wrote to the show, they'd send you back these cards in an envelope and say thanks for watching the show, and they'd have a facsimile autograph on the back. So I collect movie and television postcards. And now what I'm going to do is transition a little bit into, oh, I also collect TV guides, rare
Oh,
regional
okay.
TV guides. Here's Hogan's Heroes, which is also my all-time favorite TV show. Probably because my dad was in the military and I was used to hanging around uniforms. As far as magazines, we referenced earlier, here's not the first WWF program, but one of the first of Hulk Hogan when
Oh,
he won
yes.
the championship. This is number 109, I believe. Yeah, it's number 109. They began with number 100 for the WWF, and they went up to about number 246. And then after that, they just started using the monthly WWF magazine and putting an insert in of the matches for that night. And here's the first
Right.
issue of the WWF magazine from 1984 with the
Wow.
Hulkster on it. I wish I'd gotten that signed while I was able, but I didn't. And I've only done
Sure.
one other podcast slash video on my collection, and that was uh, with Anthony Havlovic, and it was regarding my WWF ice cream collection. You'll recall the old ads of the WWF ice cream bars, and I liked
Oh, yeah.
I like to collect the cards, and I one of the very very few, if not the only person that has all of them. I drove my local ice cream guy crazy because I would be running after him or stalking him around the neighborhood. And in those days, you could tell what the card was by seeing, what was on the back of the box. So if he had a box that I already had, I know I don't want that one. Do you have any other ones? So I drove him nuts. I even went to the point of going down to where all the ice cream trucks got their stock at noon before they went out in the street when the kids got out of school, and just going from truck to truck seeing what they had. That was the only way you could complete the set. There were 12 of them, but
Wow.
usually if you got a case of ice cream bars, which I did one time, thinking I would get a bunch, I got like 22 Bobby Heenan cards in the case. So I was going, this isn't the way to do it. So anyway, here's a couple. Here's the original ice cream box from the 1987 that has the offer on the back. Actually, that's not it. That's just a Hulk Hogan one. That's from the second year. But I actually do have the original ice cream box. Yeah, this is it.
Wow, that's
This is the Superstar collector cards. Collect all 12 of Hogan. So that's one of the things that of all my wrestling stuff, that my wrestling card stuff, even though they're not the most valuable, that's my favorite one because it was the most personal project for me, trying to assemble
sure.
those sets each year and just trying to figure out what existed, what didn't, where I could find it. Because, gosh, sometimes, the ice cream trucks wouldn't come. They'd be in a different neighborhood and I'd have to figure out where they were going. So it was labor intensive, but it was fun. Unlike just going down to your local grocery store and picking up a box of cards, that's easy. But actually running this stuff down was fun and it was difficult. As far as com-
Yeah, I mean it's the hunt.
as far as comics go, what I'd like to do is go through my top 12 of comics, and then I will go through my top 12 of promo photos. I'll begin with number 12, and these not necessarily the most valuable comics I have, but to me, in the order, descending order, these are my favorites. So this
Sure.
is Hulk 181. It features the first appearance in full of Wolverine. I bought this from 7-Eleven in 1976 or something like that, 75. It's not actually his
Wow.
first appearance, it's his second appearance. He appeared in the last panel of the previous issue, but that's the most valuable issue of Wolverine. In the next Avengers movie, which comes out next year, will feature prominently Doctor Doom. This is my first appearance of Doctor Doom from Fantastic Four 5, and it's just about perfect condition. Again, graded, who knows what it would go for, but with Robert Downey Jr. scheduled to play Doctor Doom, I anticipate that's going to be a very sought after issue. This is Fantastic Four number 12 and 10th on my list in descending order. First meeting of the Hulk and the Thing. I purchased this for $20 from Graphic Fantasy in Oakland in 1975 using some of my money that I'd earned over the summer working at the cannery. I wouldn't say it's mint condition.
Wow.
I'd say it's at least very fine. And who knows? It's worth more than $20 now.
Right.
I purchased this that same weekend. Tales of Suspense 39, the origin and first appearance of Iron Man.
That's a good one. I've actually never seen that one.
It's pretty rare. And it actually was not terribly sought after until Robert Downey Jr. portrayed the character. Iron Man was always a second tier type hero in the Marvel Universe, but Downey Jr. actually made him the centerpiece of that entire franchise cinematically.
Sure.
Purchased this that same weekend. Journey into Mystery number 83, the origin and first appearance of the mighty Thor.
Wow.
Avengers number 4 features the first modern age appearance, Silver Age appearance of Captain America. He had previously been published in comic books from the 40s into the early 50s, but he'd been discontinued when Marvel changed lines from superheroes into romance comics and Western comics and horror comics. But when they brought the superheroes back, of course, they had to bring back Captain America. And Captain America would appear in the fourth issue of Avengers. Here's the first. Largely mimics the lineup of the movie, even though the Hulk was only actually a member of the Avengers in the first two issues. He is in Avengers number 1, and their opponent
Wow.
is Loki. Bought this for $1,000 about 1980. Fantastic Four number 1, the very first Marvel superhero comic book of the Silver Age.
Wow. What's the value look like on that nowadays, roughly?
I honestly don't know. I don't follow current prices. I purchased this for $650 from my local comic store. I remember my wife and I had only been married about maybe a year, and I went to the comic store and they had a complete run of Amazing Spider-Man from 1 through about 9, and it was going to cost me about $1,000. That's about all we had in the bank. And I called her up on the phone at work because it was my day off. And I said, I'm at the comic store. They got Spider-Man 1 through 9 in just about perfect condition. Do I have your permission to buy them? And I was fully expecting her to say, we only have $1,000 in saving. Don't you dare. But I knew I had to keep her. She said, go for it. So
Wow, that's great.
I got this at the same time I got Fantastic Four #1, and I got it for the same price, $1,000. This is Amazing Fantasy 15, the first appearance of Spider-Man. Spider-Man #1 is actually his second appearance. And this is the comic that I referenced earlier as my most valuable. It's got the Stan Lee COA on the back. And this was
Ah,
I bought this comic for about $500 in 1980, but when I bought it, had already been signed by Jack Kirby. I'm going to try to hold this to where you can see it. See between his legs is Jack Kirby, the artist signature, and my personal all-time favorite artist. And then I got Stan to sign it up here. So I would imagine there are very few copies of any book that have both their signatures, let alone such a signature book as the origin and first appearance of the Incredible Hulk. And
that's
I
beautiful.
wouldn't even know. I remember Stan was taken aback by the fact that Jack Kirby had previously signed it because Jack had been gone at the time Stan signed it for at least 20 years, so there couldn't be too many that feature both of them. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to take you into my top 12 promo photos, since many of the people watching this are likely into pro wrestling and pro wrestling collectibles. I'm going to take you through first my top 12 WCW/NWA promo photos. Then I'm going to take you through my top 12 WWE P number promo photos. And finally, my favorites, the top 12 of the golden age of wrestling from the 80s and into the early 90s, the non-P numbered, unnumbered WWF promos. Okay, for WCW at number 12, I've got this rare one. Now, WCW, I chose this one also because of the size. This is not 8 by 10. I believe it's 5 by 8. And it's high gloss, and it's Ricky Steamboat in his short run as WCW champion in that tremendous series that he had with Ric Flair. That'd be number 12. This promo photo of Ric Flair with the big gold belt is actually from Japan, and it's a little bit less. It's about 4.5 by 5 by 4.5 by 6. That's my favorite of Flair from the 80s. I got Vader to sign this for me. It's Vader time. This is a very early WCW promo before they were using the logos or even using identifying copyright information or dates on the promo photos. This again is about 5 by 7.
That's a great shot.
I know we have a lot of Sting fans out there. This is Sting's first promo photo, 8 by 10 color. I've seen this promo photo also with a WCW logo at the bottom. Mine does not have that. I wish it did, but this is identical to it in every other way. It must have been right at that point when they were transitioning from using no logo to using the logo and using copyright information. This would have been from 1990. This is the only one I could find of the early Horsemen. And it's not the original group. It's got Sid in there, and it's got Barry Windham, but it does have Ole, Flair, and Arn. So it's about as close as you're going to get. This is from 1990. I actually got this from a neighbor of Ole Anderson. I don't remember where I'd seen it, but he had posted it. I got in contact with him. I offered him $500, and he laughed. He goes, "It's not worth $500. I'll sell it to you for 200." I go, "No, I'm paying you $500 for this promo because you don't know what you have." And
Yeah.
you can see it's signed by Ole. So that I really enjoy that one and the story that goes along with it. One of my favorite performers, again being a heel fan, was Ravishing Rick. Ravishing Rick was one of the best workers of his era and criminally underrated with wrestling fans. My favorite wrestler, the only reason that I even watched WCW post NWO was Savage. He just had a charisma and a magnetism that was captivating, and that one is signed. You might recognize the guy there. He has hair, but it's Stone Cold, pre-Stone Cold, and it's signed. It's when he's a U.S. champion. This is the only one I've ever seen of it. A lot of WCW promos are very, very difficult to find. This was my biggest WCW want that I was able to finally locate. It's Austin, again, it's signed with Pillman. Just imagine if Pillman had signed that too.
Oh, yeah.
This is the one I've only seen one of. It's Austin's first promo photo from 1991 with Lady Blossom, his then wife, Jeannie Clark. If someone else has one out there, leave a note on YouTube and let me know if you have an original. Okay, we're down to the last two. My all-time favorite tag team. The Midnight Express with Jim Cornette, Stan Lane, and Bobby Eaton. This is a 4x5. It's kind of, WCW would print their promo photos in a variety of different sizes. And for years it confused me. I just didn't consider them promo photos because they weren't 8x10, but they are. That's what they did during that particular year. They'd switch printing companies or they'd switch paper size. And WCW was running a shoestring budget, so it makes sense that you could probably make 4 promo photos out of the same amount of paper that you use for one, and so they would do that. My number one all-time WCW promo. This is not it, but I'm showing this here so you will get an idea of. This is a 5x7, and this is the 8x10. That's the main reason I watch WCW. Not Flair, not Dusty, not Nikita, not Magnum, but I just love the symmetry and the tag team work of the Midnight Express and the loudmouth of Jim Cornette. So those are my top 12 WCW. I'm going to go into the P numbers now very quickly. You can't tell the story of wrestling, and honestly, he should be on my Mount Rushmore wrestling, but he's not. This is Dusty Rhodes Hall of Fame promo photo from 2007, signed by him. That's number 12. Number 11, Feel the Power, autographed by the Warrior, 1989. Warrior's first promo photo, which actually exists in a Dingo Warrior version, which probably predates this by a week or a month or so, because they very quickly, after his introduction, changed his name from Dingo to Ultimate. He was known as Dingo when he was in World Class Championship Wrestling, and Vince wanted to rebrand him there were too many Warriors at the time, so it couldn't just be the Warrior. That's from 1987. It's my only Vince McMahon autograph, and it's actually his first promo photo. I got this from my buddy Christian Vernitz in Germany. It's autographed by Vince on Bruno's blazer, and interestingly, even though Vince is featured equally in this promo, he's not credited at the bottom of the promo, just Bruno. But I consider this his first. It's from 1985, Superstars of Wrestling broadcast. I got this one from you, Joe. It was my biggest want in the 1980s promos, and it's a Hulk Hogan color version, which I never had. It's classic, iconic shot of the Hulkster. Would have been nice to have gotten signed. Here's Hulk's first one. He actually has 3 color ones from 1984. This is by far the rarest of the 3, and the only one I've seen of him. It commemorates his winning the WWF Championship, probably taking it at Madison Square Garden the very night when he's wearing his American-made shirt he wore to the ring. No collection's complete without this one. Flair with the big gold belt when he was known as the real world's champion in WWF upon his arrival in late 1991. Bobby Heenan. We were talking managers earlier. This is the gold standard, and it's signed. The only tag team that gives the Midnight Express a run for their money, and my affections is the Heart Foundation. I'm actually wearing their shirt right now.
Oh, nice.
And this is signed by both Brett and Jim. The guy that drew me originally back into pro wrestling, Roddy Piper, signed with the Ace, Cowboy Bob Orton, both signed. My favorite of Piper. Now, my final two, virtually the same thing, but my favorite male and female performers ever in wrestling, both signed, both sadly gone. First is the Coliseum video version of the Macho Man and the Sensational Queen. And my favorite of any promo from any era is this one of Savage and Sherry, their color 8 1/4 by 11 WWF 1990 promo. Finally, the P numbers. Number 12, can't have a P series without a Hulk Hogan autograph. That's P27. By far the rarest of the Flair P series is P60. The P64 Real World's Champion variant is also hard, but this one is 10 times harder. Do you recognize the Ringmaster? You probably do if you're a wrestling
Oh,
aficionado.
yes.
That's his first. It's P331. I probably had 5 or 6 of them over the years, but you never see them anymore. Undertaker's only P series number with the gold belt. P399. Now, interesting story here. I got this and another promo in my top 12 from a dealer on eBay that purportedly worked or had a relative work at the WWF printing facility. And he had access to promo photos that either were discontinued or canceled outright. So two of these will be from that particular dealer. I purchased at the same time. This is P720 of The Undertaker with Sarah. It was largely unreleased, I believe. There are probably a handful, 5, 6, 7 at the most, that I know exist. So this one's very rare. Would have had to have come from likely the same source because Undertaker and Sarah had a parting of the ways, and that promo ceased to exist because they ceased to exist as a couple. Primetime Wrestling was Gorilla and Bobby, and that's Bobby Heenan, and this is my autograph of the Gorilla. It's even though it's a 1988 promo photo picture, it's actually from 1998 P Series P472. Interesting story. You got this from Andrew. Andrew Kella sold me this. It's P512, which I knew existed, but I'd never seen. And it's actually signed, even though I need to change my name to Jason, I guess. Now, P512, which also existed as The Brood, or no, I'm sorry, which also existed as another promo. It shares a P number. Neither were released. Here's the other P512, and it's the only rock that I did not have that I know of. Coming down to the very end here. P494. For some reason, you never, ever, ever see this one. That and P512 are by far the most difficult of the rocks, and this one's signed. I believe this was largely rejected by the Rock and replaced with P500, which is much more common. My favorite promo of the Rock is from WrestleMania. It was given out in the Massachusetts area in 1998 when the Rock was defending the Intercontinental Belt at WrestleMania, and Rock signed this one. Okay, now here's the other promo photo that I purchased from the eBay seller that had access to the WWF printing facility's files. This was a promo photo that was produced to be distributed in 2003. It's P822. This is actually a printer's proof. To my knowledge, it was never actually printed, and if it was done in very small amounts. So anyway, this is P822. It's printed on photo paper and high gloss, unlike most WWF P number color promos, which are semi-gloss. This one is high gloss. It actually had printer's remarks written in pen, which I was able to remove from it. So it looks, and again, it's one of my all-time favorites. You'll notice at the bottom it even has the TM in ink, because they hadn't even gotten to the stage where they put the TM on in the final printing. Okay, here's my number one. No, wait, that's not it. Sorry, I don't know how that got in there.
I know that guy.
And my number one, and to my knowledge, the most valuable of all the P series, and probably in most people's eyes, the most valuable promo photo would be P450. Just the iconic shot, uber rare. He has 3 promos with him in carrying the WWF title in each. The other 2 are in ring. This one's posed, and this is by far the best and the rarest. Who even knows what that's worth? But those are my top promo photos in my collection.
Awesome. Thank you so much for walking us through that. I mean, there's some amazing pieces that a lot of people probably haven't even seen before. You know, some really rare shots there, some really rare comic books. Awesome to see. Now, you mentioned how you were able to take some of the notes off of the Piper promo. Why don't you tell the fans your best source of removing writing and which promos that you can actually remove, on and that sort of thing? Kind of give the history of that.
Well, I've done it a number of times, like my Heart Foundation promo, which I showed you earlier, actually was personalized. But it is possible to remove many inks from high gloss promos. You can't from semi gloss that I know of. But I've removed it with a product. I'll quickly get it for you to show it to you. That they sell on Amazon. It's called PEC 12. This will work. This will work on promo photos that are high gloss only, and you just use it with the pads they sell with it. I would suggest you try it on if you're so inclined, that you try it on a promo photo that has very little value, or even just a regular photo. It will, some Sharpies it will remove, others it will not. So it's not one size fits all, but it's the only product I've seen commercially available that enables me to remove personalizations from autograph photos. Now, as far as the Piper goes, that was actually written in grease pencil, which I guess many printers would use because it's easily removable. And I just removed that with a terry cloth towel.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, for giving us a deep dive into some of your personal favorites and the history of some of your collection there. And I just want to thank you for, taking the time to do so. There you have the 1-2-3 Kid Hasbro figure, mint on card, Ultimate Warrior, 1989.
Both of those I bought at the toy store.
Wow. Oh, so you've had them ever since.
Yep. Wouldn't pay the money for it.
Now, WWF.
What's that?
Right. WWE is actually back with LJN. So they're going to be coming out with some more new LJNs, but also re-releasing some of the originals. I saw King Kong Bundy.
I saw a Dusty Rhodes.
Going to be re-released.
Wasn't there a Dusty Rhodes too? That one kind of piqued my interest, but I've run out of wall space. I'm just going to stick with the originals.
Now, is your room wall to wall?
Well, here, I'll give you a little. Behind me, as you can see, is the Hasbros. And they wrap all the way around here. And my LJNs are on that wall.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate you taking the time.
You're welcome.
And hope you enjoyed it, fans. And we'll be back, I'm sure, with more Mike Ford.
Thank you, Joe. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Same here.